Good morning and welcome to the OBX Wave Report, the January 26th version of the OBX Wave Report, where we discuss all things waves, weather, climate, and beach lifestyle, and where we advocate for climate action, yay, to defend our coastlines by mass deploying clean energy, and where we also do all the things we can to support real freedom and democracy. I see the two as linked, mass deploying clean energy and supporting real freedom and democracy. The pro-democracy forces of the world are the ones out there also promoting the advancement of our human civilization toward sustainability, toward a better world in many respects along many pathways. And one of the key pathways right now is getting that clean energy mass deployed. But on another related issue, I just do want to briefly mention that I see President Biden's decision to send 31 M1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine to help repel the fascistic Russian invasion of that nation, which is a threat to democracy, not just in Ukraine, but across Europe and the world. Russia has attacked democracies across the world through information warfare and by adding fuel to right-wing extremism through its information warfare campaigns and numerous attempts across the world to unseat the power of we the people and replace it with the power of dictators, tyrants, autocrats, the dark forces of history. So the sending of the Abrams tanks to Ukraine does send a message for real freedom and democracy. And I also see the war in Ukraine as linked to the fight to mass deploy clean energy. Russia has been trying to use oil and gas as a weapon against Europe, has preyed upon Europe's dependency on fossil fuels, and has, like many petro entities around the world, attacked those who are advocating for the rapid movement away from fossil fuels, because I think it sees oil as and gas as a way to advance its policy of aggression and promotion of dictatorship around the world. So yeah, so just a little brief statement of support for the policies of Joe Biden and the Democrats in defending real freedom and democracy over there in Ukraine. I've got to say it, I'm a National Guard veteran, and I see these things as linked. I see lots of things as linked. That's what I do. All right, so now for today's OBX wave report, we're gonna talk about some waves. We've got some big waves here in the Outer Banks in the range of 2 to 8 feet, which is pretty big for the East Coast especially, but the Outer Banks does get some big surf, particularly in the wintertime. And we're getting these big waves because we recently had a gale force system, a massive front that swept through yesterday, and we got some great footage of the weather events impacting the Outer Banks yesterday as the front swept through. I got some crazy footage of torrential rain driving down in Kitty Hawk yesterday, just sheets and sheets of driving rain, wind-driven rain, and torrential downpours. We got in the range of 1 to 2 inches across portions of the Outer Banks today, up more toward Virginia Beach. Looks like they got some heavier rain, maybe in the range of 2 inches plus. We'll have to see what the rainfall totals were, but very heavy rains across the Outer Banks last night, along with some gale force winds. Today, though, with the front passing, we have much brighter, clearer air sweeping on in. I can see the bright blues of the sky, the majestic blues overhead. The winds are still coming strong now out of the west and northwest behind the front, bringing in some cooler air, but it's not too cold. Um, Ocean water temperatures out there are pretty chilly, in the range of the upper 40s for the northern beaches and the 50s for the southern beaches. So we're getting into that coldest water temperature region coldest water temperature time of the year. One of these days I will learn to speak. In any case, we're going to go into the details with you. Right now, I'm showing you the NOAA geocolor composite provided by the National Hurricane Center, which is just an amazing source for gorgeous satellite shots. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some benchmarks for the storm that swept through yesterday. I got my alert level pumped up a little bit on Sunday when we had a powerful frontal system come through and pump up the wind speeds to hurricane force gusts over at Jeanette's Pier this past Sunday, and that was unexpectedly intense. And this most recent storm, though intense, did not produce any hurricane force wind gusts. Looking at the wind measure at Jeanette's Pier for Wednesday, January 23rd, 25th, 2023, we did have a long period of high sustained winds in the range of around 30 to 38 miles per hour. So sustained gale force to near gale force conditions with gale force gusts. Maximum gust recorded at Jeanette's Pier yesterday was around 7:35 p.m. at 50 miles per hour, and that was in some of those stronger squalls. So tropical storm force and gale force winds definitely coming in from the southwest yesterday, along with those torrential rains, which made the experience very similar to that of a tropical storm. Although this particular storm was just a massive frontal system that blanketed the U.S. East Coast with some severe weather yesterday. All right, so let's go ahead and move on into our infrared satellite shot as we say goodbye to the massive frontal system that swept through yesterday and is now heading on off the U.S. East Coast. The storm center out here north of Newfoundland, or north of Maine and northwest of Newfoundland. We've got some snowy weather sweeping on in through the Great Lakes and through parts of the Northeast today. Not too crazy snowy, although we did get some pretty heavy snows with this massive frontal system that swept on through. We do have some impulses moving in from the north and this area of moisture lurking off the western seaboard of Mexico, feeding into some Gulf moisture. And we're going to talk about some tendency for storms to form for the U.S. East and perhaps a shift back in the tendency for storms to come in through the Northwest at least. So this is more of a like a longer range kind of thing. So we'll talk a little bit about that. All right, so looking at the National Weather Service radar, I zoomed way out so you can see where the snows are up here up north, and we have some precipitation up to the northwest as well. But for the most part, the United States weather picture is less stormy than it was yesterday, and particularly for the Outer Banks down here. All right, so looking at the NOAA quantitative prediction forecast to see where the heavy precipitation events are likely, and where you see the heavy precipitation events, you also kind of get an idea where the storms are going to be. All right, and this little spot here, this big spot here over the Tennessee, Kentucky, northern Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas region is interesting and worthy of note. It looks like we're looking at 3 to 4 possibly more inches of rainfall over this region over the next week. I'll have to keep an eye on that. If there's a really big storm that develops there, that could be an indicator, pre-indicator for some serious flooding. For the southeast, though, it does look like it's going to be a bit stormy, probably stormier than normal, and probably stormier than normal here in the Outer Banks. And this is what we've been experiencing with these big frontal storms coming through over the past week. And Looks like we're going to have a continuation, maybe a shift to more coastal storms kind of tending to develop with lows offshore. We'll have to take a look at that. It is worth noting that the west does see a continued general trend toward rainier conditions, but nothing like what the West saw from mid-December to mid-January. We hope that trend stays and things don't get too crazy. Although the West does need rainfall for this time of year to help replenish those aquifers. So let's hope that that is the case because the US West is presently in an ongoing drought situation. You know what? Before we get into waves, we're going to go on another tangent. I want to look at the US drought monitor because I just had a question in my brain about what the current drought situation is for the US West given the storms that have occurred. Okay, so looking at the US drought monitor, we do have drought conditions across the US West, although it is worth noting that the recent storms across California have tamped down the drought. Drought is still ongoing, and that is worth noting. And then broader, more broadly for the U.S. West, there is widespread, moderate, severe, extreme, and exceptional drought. Well, I'm sorry, widespread, moderate, and severe drought, more isolated pockets of severe and exceptional drought. Um, this is also interesting to me because in the central U.S., looks like we've got some sections of extreme drought, and where drought is, it's where we're going to be looking for fire hazard later on as we get into spring and summer, although it is worth noting that the fire season for the US West is pretty much now year round, although I haven't really heard much news of major fire events recently. Those who follow fire forecasts could probably give me some more information. I might take a look at that. This is the OBX wave report, and we're talking about drought in California. I did say we talk about all things waves, weather, climate, and beach lifestyle. So yeah, so you're gonna have to be a bit of a climate nerd if you're gonna follow me. Please like and subscribe because being a surfer and being a climate nerd is a thing. I don't know. I was out there doing the Ubers, and you know what? I like doing the Ubers because I get to meet people and I get to hear what they say and think about, and it's just very fascinating. It's almost like I don't know. I took social science in college, and so you can kind of be a social scientist as an Uber driver. You can be like, ooh, what are people thinking about? I can get into their brains. But oh, so in any case, people in the Outer Banks, they're like, oh, weather, I love weather, and I love surfing and I love fishing and surfing, fishing, and weather and climate. They are all there. They're like in the bundle. You've got to be in touch with the weather and the climate if you are a surfer because if you're not aware of the weather and the climate conditions, you're not going to be alert to what the swells are doing and how the ocean responds to weather. And these things are interconnected. And for the OBX wave report, we're going to do the different thing. We're not going to go micro. We're going to go big. We're going to go interconnected. Um, so yeah, be prepared for the expansion of your brain into the wide angle of the lens to view the worlds. Okay, so yes, still drought out there in the West. No climate change deniers. The big rains did not destroy the drought out in California, even though there were some big rains. Um, and yep, so that's worth noting. Okay, so getting into the local picture for waves in the Outer Banks. Going back to the micro. We are going to go and zoom in on Jeanette's Pier using our Google Maps for informational purposes. And right now at Jeanette's Pier, the wave heights are in the range of 2 to 4 feet. So we've got some pretty decent sized waves out there at Jeanette's Pier in the wake of our gale. And I did talk about this yesterday. We get this in the Outer Banks, we get these wraparound swells, and it has something to do with the shape of the coastline. So, like for example, let's look at this. Um, so we've got this. I'm gonna zoom way out. So we got this big old kind of almost a bay here between, it's not really a bay, but it's just this big bend in the coastline that looks almost like a bay. So if you take a like a line, if you draw a line from Miami to Cape Hatteras, you've got this straight line that goes way across a big stretch of ocean. So imagine a wind blowing from Miami to Cape Hatteras, and it's picking up this swell over this big chunk of water. And that swell just moves. It goes whoosh, it moves in a wave-like pattern, like, doing the wave thing over toward the coast here. And what happens is it starts to interact with the coastline. You imagine these big old swells, these big broad swells sweeping across the ocean, and they run into the Outer Banks. And what do when they like the end of them does this, it like whoop, it wraps around, right? So you get this arm of this swell that wraps around and hits the beaches here, up and down the Outer Banks. And where wraps around the most is at the point where the coastline changes, where the coastline shifts. And one of the big wave spots in the Outer Banks, the major big wave spot, is Buxton. Consistently has big waves. And why is that? It's because it gets the swell from almost everywhere. So you get a swell coming from the north, it's going to wrap around and hit Buxton. If you get a swell from the east, it's just going to smash right into Buxton before it hits anything else. If you get a swell from the south, it's going to wrap around those south-facing beaches, and it's going to boom, slip around to Buxton. So yeah, here on the Outer Banks, we get the waves, and we get the waves because the swells come from north, south, east, southwest, all the places, and then they wrap around. And here it is. It's like we're in this big point that becomes like the point in a big bathtub of waves that is the North Atlantic. So yay! That's my non-scientific analysis of a meta-analysis. Well, I guess it's a semi pseudo. I don't know. It's a down to earth kooky explanation of the science of how waves strike the Outer Banks and can wrap around, which is fascinating. And it's one of the reasons why Jeanette's Pier right now is getting decent waves. We're getting this wraparound here at Jeanette's Pier, and we're getting 2 to 4 foot waves, even though swell primarily is being driven up from the southwest and the south. All right, so 2 to 4 foot waves at Jeanette's Pier, 4 foot waves coming in at the 10-second period with the primary swell, secondary swell coming in at 4 seconds. Winds are out of the west-northwest at 23 miles per hour. This is a strong northwest flow. It's going to be knocking down those wave heights throughout the day today. So get out there if you want to get out and surf now or probably earlier, you Dawn Patrol folks. All right, air temperatures are 48 degrees, so pretty chilly, and ocean water temperatures 48 degrees, very cold. Freeze your bum off kind of cold. Get your wetties on and be warm and wear your hoods and your booties and your gloves and do all the things to prevent hypothermia. Weather conditions are sunny, windy. Expected high today of 59, which we have already reached. So the front has come through. We reached the 59 degrees like in the just after midnight hours. So today, the remaining high temperature, which is not a real high, but the likely warmth in the afternoon is looks like it's going to hit around 50. So it's not going to get to 59 again. It's already gotten there. All right, so moving on down south to Rodanthe or Rodanth. We have 3 to 4 foot waves at Rodanth. And this again, with the swell coming in from the south, wrapping around. Primary swell is coming in at 9 seconds at 4.5 feet, and the secondary swell is coming in at 3 seconds. Winds are also out of the northwest at 22 miles per hour, very strong offshore flow here. Air temperatures right now are 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Ocean water temperatures cold, 49 degrees Fahrenheit, with the influence of the Labrador current, the upwelling, and the land maintaining those cold water temperatures. We're going to get more into a Gulf Stream influence as we head south, but water temperatures are cold. It's the coldest time of year for water temperatures. Weather conditions are sunny, windy. Expected high today of 61 degrees was already hit earlier today, just like everywhere else, because the front swept on through. And so the temperatures in the afternoon may reach about 52 degrees. All right, so I did talk about Buxton, and we're going to go back to Buxton again because Buxton is very interesting, fascinating, in fact. And looking at Buxton waves right now, we have 5 to 6 foot waves generally, 6.5 foot waves coming in from the south southwest here. So we got a southwest swell that is wrapping around at 6.5 feet. That is the secondary swell. The primary swell is coming from the southeast at 4.5 feet. So very interesting confluence of waves here at Buxton, as we will tend to see. Temperature right now is 54 degrees Fahrenheit at Buxton. And with that Gulf Stream influence more prevalent down there at Buxton, the ocean water temperature is 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that is a big difference in temperature from north to south here. Let's just zoom out. So we've got Rodanthe here, and we got Buxton here. And if we look at our little scale here right under my head, which you can't see, but I was thinking you guys could see that, but no, that's underneath my talking max headroom head. We've got about 20 miles separating, maybe 25 miles separating Rodanthe and Buxton. And in that 25 miles, the temperature difference in the ocean is 8 degrees Fahrenheit. So big difference, small distance. And so much warmer waters, although 57 degree Fahrenheit waters are still cold, cold, cold. So you're going to need all the stuffs to keep you warm. It is windy at Buxton with those winds coming out of the west-northwest offshore at 23 miles per hour as well. And the forecast for the rest of the day is windy, sunny, and the high again has already been reached. So we are going to see 52 degree temperatures this afternoon. And with such a strong swell coming in from the south, we would be remiss if we did not include a south-facing beach, and we are going to go down to Frisco for that. And right now at Frisco, the wave heights are coming in at 5 to 8 feet with an 8-foot swell coming in at 9 seconds from the southwest here. So slamming directly into the beach here at Frisco. And right now, so this is the big wave spot here with that south swell. We're going to get into the wave models and look at what's going on with the swell a little bit later in the wave report. But yeah, big wave spot today is Frisco, which is not usually the case. Buxton's trying, but it doesn't quite get there. So 5 to 8 foot waves at Frisco with that 9-second primary swell. Present temperatures are in the range of 54 degrees Fahrenheit in the air and 59 degrees Fahrenheit in the water. So warmest water conditions in our sample of observations today also coming from Frisco with near 60 degree Fahrenheit water temperatures. Still cold, still need your cold weather protection, but not anywhere near as cold as Jeanette's Pier, which is 11 degrees Fahrenheit colder. So again, that big range from north to south. Weather conditions for Frisco are windy, sunny, expected high today after the high that occurred at midnight. So the expected temperatures in the afternoon in the range of the lower 50s, around 52 degrees as well. And those strong northwesterly winds and west-northwesterly winds are expected to continue and slowly diminish throughout the day. All right, so let's get into some more observations. I'm an observation nerd. So let's do the nerdy things. And can you be a nerd and a surfer at the same time? I think I proved that point. Yep. All right. So in any case, looking at the present swell conditions, let's make sure everything is up to date. All right. And in the near offshore environment, I'm going to zoom in really close here for the Outer Banks. So right now in the near offshore environment, we've got a swell coming in with the primary wave heights in the range of 8 feet, 7.5 to 8 feet for the south-facing beaches. This is expected. We had those strong southerly winds kick up yesterday, those gale force winds, and the swell has been generated by that front, which has now passed through. You can see the influence of the front on the ocean surface here. And in the offshore environment, it's just worth noting that we've got 20-foot significant wave heights out here in the shipping lanes. Some of these significant wave heights, or some of these, the significant wave heights are the top 30% of wave heights. And you can get a rogue wave or big wave in that general 20-foot range that pops up to double that. So possibly 40-foot waves out there in association with a massive front that just swept on through. Getting back close to shore for the more northerly beaches on the other banks, let's go ahead and select the swell off Buxton. Also in the range of about 7 to 7.5 feet. And then in the near offshore environment here over in near the Jeanette's Pier area, we've got 6.5 foot waves. Clearly those waves aren't completely maintaining their energy as they wrap around, but we are still getting 2 to 4 foot waves right there at the beaches. All right, so that's a sample of waves for the Outer Banks. Let's do actually, let's go ahead and run the models here. I do want to look at some other locations, and I was trying to figure out how I want to organize it. All right, so let's just go ahead and run the model and see what happens tomorrow. Looks like the waves tamp down to the range of 4 foot in the near offshore environment for the more southerly beaches, and the range of 3.5 foot for the more northerly beaches here off the Outer Banks. Maybe 3 to 4 foot. So 3 to 4 foot across the Outer Banks. And then for Saturday, we get the waves tamped down again. So smaller waves in the range of 2 feet in the near offshore environment for the Outer Banks on Saturday. And then getting on into Sunday, waves still getting small. So it looks like Saturday and Sunday, unfortunately, are going to be relatively small days for waves, according to these models. Swell shifts off toward the east, so coming from east to west here. And then by Monday, we start to get the influence of another front and possible coastal storm rolling in with stronger winds and waves and swells picking up from the south in the range of 7 to 7.5 feet in the near offshore environment. I'm going to go ahead and advance this model by the hours, see how many hours we can get as this storm. The storm is a little bit interesting to me because it looks like it might develop into kind of a coastal low and a little bit of a nor'easter type influence. Um, and we do start to see that little swirl in the waves that might indicate that. Ooh, with swells coming in from the east in the range of 6 to 7 feet later in the day on Monday, running into early, looks like early Tuesday. Yep. So 27, 28, 28. Yep. Tuesday. And then, yeah. And then the storm kind of forms, gets a little bit organized, and then looks like it starts to head on off toward the east. But yes, we've got another storm coming in the Monday through Tuesday timeframe, which will again kick up the waves, although not in too crazy a fashion. We might actually get some really just good rideable waves out of this thing. So it is worth noting because we might actually have a fun few days for winter surf Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll see. All right, let's just go ahead and look out to the North Atlantic here. I do want to show you some of the conditions for some of the other beaches. And off of Ireland right now, we've got significant wave heights in the range of 7 feet. Off of Portugal, significant wave heights in the range of 8 to 9 feet. And out here off Iceland is very interesting, significant wave heights in the range of 19 feet. And with another storm system coming in tomorrow, the significant wave heights off of Iceland are expected to kick up to 27 feet. That's pretty big. And most of the storm still generally moving off toward Greenland, Iceland, Svalbard, and the Arctic Circle, but there does appear to be a bit of a change in orientation of the storms, more toward the British Isles, at least for a brief period here. We'll have to see if that trend remains. Right now, we've got a high pressure system that's warding storms off toward the Arctic. Okay, now for the US West Coast. Right now, wave conditions for the central and northern California beaches are in the range of 6 feet. And then for the more southerly beaches, we've got wave heights in the range of 2 to Looks like 3 feet in some locations. Out at the point, we've got wave heights in the range of 5 feet. And let's go ahead. I'm just curious to see what's going to happen for California. Looks like we've got generally similar conditions, although we get a few impulses of larger waves coming in over the next 5 days. I did want to point out the big storms that are rolling through the Pacific here are emerging primarily off of the east coast of Asia here and off Japan, sweeping on up toward the Arctic. And right now there's a big storm kicking up, significant wave heights in the range of 35 feet, and then a potential very strong storm to nail the tail end of the Aleutian chain with significant wave heights in the range of 41 to 42 feet. All right, so that is a summary of Northern Hemisphere waves for the most part. Of course, I didn't get all of the Northern Hemisphere, but with a focus on the Outer Banks. Okay, let's get back to weather. Oops. Yeah, this was from the the Storm Prediction Center. We don't really need that right now. I did want to go through the global forecast system model. Don't want to do that now. Let's go ahead. I do want to show you the tendency for temperature and storm condition in the Climate Prediction Center. We haven't done this for a few days. It's just good to do this. It is worth noting that the lower 48 is expected to experience below normal temperatures for the 8 to 14 day period, with above normal temperatures focusing in on the US Southeast, particularly Florida, and looking away from the lower 48, Western Alaska does expect some above normal temperatures as well. Precipitation outlooks are expected to be above normal for most of the eastern seaboard and above normal for parts of Northern California, Washington, and Oregon. So it does look like we might be seeing a shift back to more stormy conditions for portions of the US West Coast, but it's worth noting that parts of the Southwest remain below normal as far as precipitation goes. And then getting into the global forecast system model for the next 10 days, let's go ahead and advance this. We see the massive frontal storm sweeping on off the US East Coast today and into tomorrow. We've got some snowy weather that keeps running in through the northern tier of the country, impulses coming down from Canada, but nothing too crazy or major apparently. We've got a big old high pressure system off the US East Coast that's dredging moisture up out of the Gulf of Mexico and helping to form another storm system that affects the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys through to the Great Lakes and the Northeast on Sunday. And that moves offshore by Monday and creates that coastal storm that I was talking to you about, with some possible severe weather for the Outer Banks on Monday. I'll have to keep a weather eye to that. And then that one moves offshore, and we might get some really nice waves on Tuesdays. Nice waves in the sense of rideable waves. And then we get another impulse riding up from the Gulf of Mexico with that moisture, severe weather potential for the US Southeast again, this time in Texas and Louisiana, and then sweeping on up toward Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, and parts of the Mississippi River Valley, with a leading edge heading into the mid-Atlantic. This on Thursday of next week. Of course, now we're in grain of salt territory as we look pretty far out into the future with these models. And then this system is expected to sweep on off the US East Coast. A more southerly component to this, worth noting, because that's where we in the Outer Banks here tend to get like coastal lows and nor'easter type events. And with this angle of the front, it does look like we've got possible northeast winds coming in off of this thing by Friday of next week. So we're going to have to keep a weather eye to that. This one, at least for the East Coast and the Outer Banks, doesn't look too powerful with this 1000 millibar low, but we have had these massive frontal systems come in. And so I'm just gonna maybe put an asterisk there. It might not depend on the strength of the low to see what kind of effects we get. Although it is worth noting that it does move off fast and it does not stall. All right, so here we start to see some of this tendency for stormy weather to start to head back toward the Pacific by Sunday, February the 5th. And this looks like a classic Pacific impulse, nothing too crazy, but if this is the tendency to get these storms coming in off the Pacific, and it is worth noting that there is a consistent precipitation event now forecast for February 5 and 6 for the West Coast. Meanwhile, for the US East Coast, we get another impulse dredging up that above normal moisture off the hotter than normal Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico into the February 6 timeframe for the US East Coast, and some severe weather associated with that, with another coastal low forming off the Outer Banks and then sweeping off to the east. And then as we head in toward the tail end of the model, as we get into February 8th through 10th, another impulse coming in through the northwest, the Pacific Northwest. Looks like a relatively strong storm system gathering for the central US and then starting to sweep on in through the Mississippi River Valley with the low reforming closer to the Gulf states before heading off toward the Great Lakes. Severe weather over the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys. No snows associated with this one. Looks like mostly rains. No major bomb here, but not an insignificant low pressure system. And then eventually toward the tail end of this thing, we get some severe weather for the US southeast, more toward the eastern seaboard. And that is the end of our model. So still stormy in the US East, a potential for a lot of heavy rains here for the Mississippi River Valley, Tennessee, and Kentucky area. I have to keep an eye on that. And a reassertion of the stormy pattern for the Pacific Northwest, although not anywhere near as crazy as it was. All right, there's another wave model. And I was also looking at some temperatures, but there's nothing really to report here. So, or at least for now. All right, so thank you for joining me for the January 26th edition of the OBX Wave Report. Waves here in the Outer Banks in the range of 2 to 8 feet. So some big waves out there. It is cold. If you head out to charge the surf today, make sure you get your wetties and your cold weather gear going. And I will be back with you shortly with some more observations from the coast. Thank you for joining me, and please remember to do everything you can to defend our coastlines from the impacts of climate change driven by fossil fuel burning. The primary effort, which I believe is also a pro-democracy, pro-future effort, is to mass deploy clean energy and set the path for sustainability for our civilizations. We can totally do it. We got this.